Okay, all right, last story here. This is a little bit of a fun one. So let's put this up there on the screen. We always save the good media stories for last. Two Fox News contributors were both stars of the pre-Trump conservative movement, Jonah Goldberg and Stephen Hayes. They've resigned from the network in protest of Tucker Carlson's January 6th special. So I think we actually covered that special whenever it was released, and you guys will know. Well, we covered some of the facts around it in terms of what was happening. And what we covered was the very basic and well-established fact now at this point that there were absolutely federal informants and there was at least one known undercover officer who were present at the January 6th, whatever you want to call it, Capitol riot, insurrection, etc. That is a well-established fact. Now, Tucker, let's just say it, he went a little far in the way that he presented that. However, if you were to look at the facts that have been established since that day and the amount of information that has come out, you'll also recall the video that we played here, the compilation video of that gentleman, Ray Epps, who before, on January 5th, the night of January 5th, was saying, we gotta go into the Capitol, we gotta go into the Capitol, we gotta go into the Capitol. And so much so that people in the crowd were chanting that he was a Fed.
Right.
And there's an entire compilation of video that shows him all the way from the night of January 5 all the way up to the lead up in which he led the charge into the Capitol itself. We know that Epps himself has never been charged with a crime while the QAnon shaman's in jail for like 4 years or whatever, despite being like obviously mentally ill. You see all of these facts. You see that Epps' name is known. It was reported in Arizona state media where he is from, and yet seemingly disappeared. So that's sketchy, you know, and there's a lot of people who have remained confidential informants or co-conspirators or whatever that have not been indicted. We know that all to be true. So on balance, you tell me which is more directionally correct. There was nobody or not. Well, these two gentlemen, Jonah Goldberg and Stephen Hayes, have resigned from Fox as saying that it was the bridge too far. This was something that pushed them over the edge. And the reason why is because what they say is that they're simply not willing to participate in this narrative of the idea that the U.S. security state is being turned on normal American citizens. That is the central critique that these two gentlemen have. This is the actual thing that has pushed them over the edge.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's very important to be established here around the actual objection that these guys have, Krystal. Do you ever want to add anything before I tell them a little bit more about Jonah Goldberg and Stephen Hayes?
Yeah, so let me just say, I haven't seen, what's it called? Patriot Purge.
It's on Fox Nation, which I will not pay for. So,
yeah, same. I haven't seen it. I have no interest in defending it.
Right.
I have no idea what claims were made. So it is entirely possible that it is
I think they said the words false flag.
Outrageous piece of propaganda.
Right.
I haven't seen it. So I'm not going to weigh in to either condemn or confirm what is there. But it is very interesting, the red lines that these guys draw. And I feel like this is a consistent theme. I mean, remember, what did John Bolton quit the administration? It was like, he
Taliban,
was mad
because we invited the Taliban to the
he was mad about like one of the few good things that Trump actually did. And that was the red line. Oh, that's the bridge too far. Now I'm out. So what Stephen Hayes said, and this was in a Ben Smith, who just breaks news left and right. It's kind of incredible. What he said to him is that he was particularly concerned about Fox lending support to the idea, quote, that there's a domestic war on terror and it's coming for half the country. That's not true. Particularly disturbing in Patriot Purge, he added, was the imagery of waterboarding and suggestions that half the country is going to be subject to this kind of treatment. That's the same kind of treatment that the federal government used when it went after al-Qaeda, that people like you defended, that people like you helped make the case for the outlandish overreaches of the national security state to start with.
Yes.
And now you want a hand wring about, oh, we can't say that this would ever be applied to some of our citizens. Well, we already know what this, I mean, we've covered the way that the same entrapment that was used primarily against young Muslim men during the war on terror is now, those tools are being used.
Same legal precedent, and in many cases, the same organizations within the FBI.
Yeah, I mean, the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, for example, many analysts who were not right-wing insane people because there were more FBI informants than there were actual plotters, whether this would have been a plot at all if the federal government didn't help push it along and craft it. So the concerns about the overreach of the national security state are very real. Now, again, this is not a defense of Patriot Purge whatsoever, which I have not seen. But I'm just judging by their statements here, and it takes some kind of gall for you to now be outraged about the imagery of waterboarding, given what these two individuals have justified and propagated and defended in the past.
I want people to know how integral Stephen Hayes in particular was in selling the American public on the war in Iraq. Here's a little book that Stephen wrote in the lead up to that. Let's put it up there on the screen. He'll try and live this one down for a long time. Two of the most vocal and unhinged advocates of the first war on terror, Jonah Goldberg and Stephen Hayes, just quit Fox News, where nobody knew they worked, in protest over Tucker Carlson. Put the next one up there on the screen, please, Eric. Check out this book. Stephen Hayes wrote how Al-Qaeda's collaboration with Saddam Hussein has endangered America. The Connection. Stephen Hayes of the Weekly Standard. That is the person that we're dealing this. One of the chief drivers of the war in Iraq wrote a book literally claiming falsely that Al-Qaeda had deep connections with Saddam Hussein to help sell the war in Iraq. And Glenn actually, I didn't even know this, wrote a fantastic piece all the way back in 2006 calling out Jonah Goldberg for justifying waterboarding and torture, in which he's calling him out. And Glenn rightfully points out, for everybody who says, what happened to you? Here's what I wrote in 2006, which is identical to what I have to say about him right now. The real question is, what happened to you? And what he's talking about there is that all of the people who rightfully recognized the role of these two gentlemen, but particularly Stephen Hayes, in creating an ideology and selling an ideology that pushed the American people to the war in Iraq, defending President George W. Bush, the single worst president of my lifetime, and probably one of the worst presidents ever in American history. You put that all together, and you ask yourself, is resigning over Fox because Tucker's Patriot Purge, is that enough to absolve you in the media's eyes? And it is. That's the thing. Chris Hayes is praising this. You know, you see Jonathan Haidt and these people being like, oh my gosh, you know, I have many disagreements, but, you know, thank you to these gentlemen upstanding. I said Jonathan Karl, who's a White House correspondent, by the way, saying these are the smartest, smartest conservative thinkers, writers, or whatever in America. Look, really what it is to me is what's forgivable and what's not. To me, the war in Iraq is unforgivable forever. And if you played a role in that, screw you and screw everything that you have to touch. And, you know, trying to paint it specifically in this way as saying he's concerned about the idea, the correct idea, that there is a domestic war on terror against half the population, when you created the original war on terror, justified the original war on terror. How dare you? That's really all I have to say. Yeah. You created this system in the first place. Yeah. And now you're concerned about, you know, people who are afraid of a misapplication and overuse of state power.
Yeah, and you know, my objection always to the framing of like they're coming after half the country is the reality is no one is safe from an overreach of state.
Coming after everybody.
I mean, look at some of the tactics that were used against Black Lives Matter protesters, if you want to understand. Like, this is going to come for anyone who dares to challenge the system, and the precedent for that was set during the war on terror and furthered and enabled by propagandists like Jonah Goldberg and Stephen Hayes. And so, yeah, Fox News is trash. Fox News has been trash for a long time, and you all are part of what built that trash heap. And look, people can come to Jesus and recognize the error of their ways, etc. But you never see that. You never see the recognition of like, oh, we helped us get to this place, and that was bad. You know, when we were justifying torture and waterboarding, and when we were lying and concocting crazy stories about Saddam Hussein and 9/11 and Al-Qaeda, like that actually was really horrifically bad, led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, led to this mass expenditure, upended an entire region, made us all less safe. How about a little bit of acknowledgement of that And so, yeah, it's always interesting, ultimately, what their red lines are. And just one other thing about Jonah Goldberg. He wrote a book called Liberal Fascism. So he also contributed to this, existential nature of politics. And he literally argued in that book that effectively every Democrat ever has been a fascist, including FDR. Mm-hmm. So, this is the level of propagandist that these individuals have been. But yeah, they're going to get on their high horse and get all kinds of media love for it.
Well, of course they have media love. And this is always what's so annoying. Listen, I mean, they have views, which they're allowed to have, and they can claim whatever they want. But what annoys me about it is that they're like, we're the true conservatives. Listen, and by the way, I'm not even a true conservative anymore, or a true conservative in any fashion, because I am not slavishly devoted to Donald Trump. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I represent the entire Republican Party or true conservatism. It's not up to me. And this is also not up to them either. It's up to the actual voters. The voters have decided that they want MAGA cringe. That's fine. Seriously. Be honest, though, about what it is. These guys want to try and say, we're going to reclaim national conservatism. It's not yours. It's up to the actual democracy. Yeah. If you fall out of it, like I do, I'm as out of it, if not more so, probably of the institutional right than them. But I'm honest with all of you about where I stand and where most of the voters stand and where the actual Republican Party is. Trying to wish cast yourself because you have such a large ego onto a party because you used to be a part of it and saying that that's what the real ideals are, who are you? It's clear that the voters don't want either what you have to say and what you're selling. The vast majority of the people who subscribe to their newsletter called The Dispatch or whatever are probably mainstream liberals who like the idea of reading a conservative. They're like, a very, very reasonable conservatism. You're not getting a real reflection of what actual Republicans think, or at least the vast majority of Republicans think. There are some people in the constituency who agree with them. I shouldn't downplay it. Glenn Youngkin is very much like a Jonah Goldberg, Stephen Hayes type conservative. So it's not like it doesn't have some electoral whatever, but let's just be honest about where you stand in the national conversation around things. Just don't try and say very egotistically that you are the person who represents real conservatism. It's not up to you. Like I said, it's a democracy. The actual voters have very much shown that they love Trump and all that a lot more than they like anything that you had to say. And you should be okay with that. You know?
It is interesting, though. There's this line in the piece that I'm curious your reaction to, where Ben Smith says, Fox employees often speak in terms of respecting the audience when they're effectively justifying bullshit that they know is just slavish fealty to Trump, never criticizing him, kind of giving a wink and a nod to all the election conspiracies. They talk about, quote, respecting the audience, as if when you're a major media institution like that, you don't have any influence over the audience. And so I found that rationalization coming from Fox, I found pretty disgusting. And, we're obviously a lot smaller than Fox, although oftentimes we get higher ratings than some of the
higher ratings than CNN and MSNBC, and actually much higher ratings than many daytime Fox, to be clear.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but, we have made it our mission to not try to pander to you of what we think you want to hear, but to actually, come from an honest place of what we think is important and trying to sort through these things. And sometimes you guys hate what we have to say, and sometimes maybe you've changed a little bit. I've certainly, changed some of my views based on having Saagar sitting next to me. So this idea that it's only a one-way street where you just have to give the audience whatever their instinct is in that moment, I find that really pretty shameful, to be honest with you. I
completely agree with you. Why do you think one thing, please do not construe this as a defense of Fox. There's a reason that I don't go on the network anymore. Do I want to be invited for a 2-minute program where you go Democrats are bad, bad. Oh, also, I also have some stuff about State of the Republicans. We'll see you later.
We'll get that next time.
And we're out of time. Boom. It's I had no interest in it whatsoever, ripping the country apart. As you said also, you have a huge amount of influence. These boomers, they got no other option. They're going to watch you no matter what. As we've seen now with the fall of OAN and Newsmax and all this stuff, they're glued to the TV. Fox is part of their routine. So if you lead them in a different direction, you cover a different story and all of that, they'll watch it. They have to. They really don't have another choice. And so you have the opportunity to create something new, to introduce something different and all of that. You just don't want to. That's cowardice.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the network and why they're really just hamstrung and they don't really know how to handle themselves at this time. So there's no heroes in this story. That's really what I want to get across, because one side's being lionized, the other side are the villains. What if both sides are the villains?
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.